Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This Day in Sports History. Hey, and welcome to another edition of This Day in Sports History. This Day in Sports History is now a member of the Sports History Podcast Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sports. Learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's June 11th, and on this day in 1955, it was the worst tragedy in motorsports. This was the 24 Hours of Le Mans, held each year in France. This race drew some of the greats in racing at the time, like Juan Manuel Fangio and Sterling Moss, who were driving the new Mercedes 300 SLR made of magnesium alloy, which was super lightweight for the time. Fangio and Mike Hawthorne, who was driving a Jaguar on this day, traded spots in the early going of the race, but on lap 35, a wreck on the front stretch quickly turned the race into a horror scene. Hawthorne passed a lap car before realizing he was being called to the pits. There weren't radios in their helmets then, they just used signboards to indicate a pit stop. So Hawthorne veered sharply towards the pits, causing the driver he had just passed to take evasive action. At that point, Frenchman Pierre Levay was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it cost him his life. His right tire hit the back of the car that had just swerved in front of him, launching his car into the air and into a concrete barrier dividing pit road and the racetrack at 150 miles per hour. LeVay's car disintegrated. He was thrown from the car and down the track, dying instantly. The engine block, the hood of his car, and other debris shot down the track, showering spectators standing on the inside of the track. The hood acted like a guillotine to many, the engine block like a 200-pound cannonball to others. LeVay's car burst into flames, fueled not only by the gasoline, but made more intense by the magnesium alloy that the car was made of. His wife watched horrified in the pits, next to his replacement driver, John Fitch. Along with LeVay, 83 spectators died that day, and 178 more were injured. Last rites were performed as others searched frantically for their friends and family. But after the racetrack was cleared and bodies were still being moved from the spectator areas, the race was restarted and run to its completion. The Mercedes drivers that were still running were quietly withdrawn from the track in the early morning hours, fearing a public relations issue if a German-made car won a death-marred race in France with the not-too-distant memory of World War II still palpable. The man whose erratic maneuver caused the horrific wreck, Mike Hawthorne and his Jaguar team, were the eventual winners the following day. Days, weeks, months, and even years later, blame was tossed about. Many blamed Hawthorne, who was apologetic immediately following the race, but changed his tune over time. LeVay was blamed for being too old to drive at such speeds. He was 50. The track was blamed for being old, as well as in desperate need of improvements. So the improvements came. The stand in the pit straight was removed. The track surface was improved and widened to handle higher speeds. After this tragedy, motor racing was banned in several countries in Europe, with a few still not permitting it. It would also be a long layoff for Mercedes in motorsports. It would be another 32 years until Mercedes would field another race team when they returned to Formula One in 1987. On this day in 1997, it was the Michael Jordan flu game. So most people know the story of this game. It was talked about during the Last Dance documentary. Heck, it's been part of NBA lore since it happened 27 years ago. But it's just too good and too big to leave on the shelf. So, refresher on the basics. This is Game 5 of the NBA Finals. It's the Chicago Bulls and the Utah Jazz. This game is in Utah with the series tied at 2 games apiece. Also, this was a 2-3-2 series, where now they play a 2-2-1-1-1, meaning that in '94 the first 2 games were in Chicago, Bulls won both. Games 3, 4, and 5 were in Utah. Jazz had won 3 and 4 and had a chance to take a 3-2 lead with a win. So this is a big game. I mean, they're all big in the finals, but you don't necessarily want to be playing with your backs against the wall, staving off elimination. All right, now, Jordan's illness. Throughout the broadcast, and for sure what the NBC announcers had been told, was that Michael was suffering from flu-like symptoms. That's how this game is going to be called the flu game and will always be the flu game. But as we learned in The Last Dance, and this is similar to what would happen to Kobe in 2000 in Sacramento that we talked about a few weeks back, right? Jordan started to get hungry around 10 or 10:30 the night before. The Bulls were staying in Park City, Utah, about 40 minutes from Salt Lake City, and Michael decided to order a pizza from a local Park City pizza restaurant. But when the pizza showed up, there were 5 guys making the pizza delivery. Jordan's personal trainer, Tim Grover, was in the room that night, and he's the one who told the story on the documentary. And he said that he just had a bad feeling when he saw the throng of people delivering that pizza. But Michael took it and said he was the only one who ate any of the pizza, despite there being several other Bulls players and also NBC's Ahmad Rashad in the room with him. He woke up at 2 in the morning and began throwing up. It continued the rest of the night and into the morning. The trainer said it was food poisoning. He tried to eat later in the day, but he struggled to hold anything down. He missed the morning shoot-around, which was an indication to his teammates that MJ was struggling and may not be able to go in the game that night. But he was determined to play in Game 5 if he could. The bus ride from Park City to the arena is a windy mountain road, and when Jordan got off the bus, he was dizzy and having trouble walking straight. So the Bulls doctor gave him 4 cups of coffee, which apparently is good for an inner ear disturbance. In pre-game warm-ups, he looked like a ghost, vacant eyes, struggling with his energy level. But what happened next surprised a lot of people. Well, not immediately. The Jazz jumped on top, feeding off the energy of the hometown crowd, and shot out to a 16-point lead in the first quarter. And that's when Jordan found that little something deep down. He scored 17 points in the second quarter, and he pulled the Bulls back to just a 4-point deficit at half. Something else to keep in mind, Karl Malone had been named the MVP for the season, despite Michael winning the scoring title over Malone by more than 2 points a game. That was fuel in the tank for Jordan, something to prove that whoever voted for Malone over him was wrong. Malone came out in the second half and did something strange. He shot jumpers. It's not to say that he couldn't score from, the mid-range, but he settled for jumpers, and it hurt his team. He missed 5 of his 6 attempts in the second half and only had 19 on the night. But Jordan struggled in the third quarter as well, only scoring a bucket in that 12-minute span. And as the game went to the fourth, the Jazz had the lead, and they built it up to an 8-point advantage with 10 minutes to play. And that's when the fuse on MJ's rocket got lit, and he took off. He scored 10 straight to give the Bulls the lead. It went back and forth from there until 46 seconds left in the ballgame. Jordan was on the free throw line. He hit the first to tie the game, but he missed the second. The Jazz couldn't grab the rebound, and Jordan came away with it. And that's when Utah made a mistake. Brian Russell, thinking that Michael was just too worn out to take a 3, decided to double-team Scottie Pippen. Pippen sent the ball back to a now wide-open Jordan, who hit the 3 to put the Bulls up with 25 seconds to go. With 6.2 seconds left, the Jazz had an opportunity to tie it, but Jeff Hornacek's shot was short, and the Bulls won Game 5, 90-87. Now, here's some Jordan flu game stats for you. He played 44 minutes, scored 38 points, including 15 in the fourth quarter. He grabbed 7 rebounds and handed out 5 assists, and then he added 3 steals to the mix. Here's what he had to say to Ahmad Rashad after the game.
I was really tired. I was very weak. At halftime, I told Phil that use me in spurts. But, somehow I found the energy. just stay strong. I wanted it really bad.
Interesting fact, it took him about 45 minutes to recover in the locker room after the game. The team doctor wanted to give him an IV of fluids to aid his recovery, but Michael's aversion to needles negated that option. This was a game that only added to the lore that was Michael Jordan. And with the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight coming up in November, it's interesting to note that Tyson fought his last professional fight on this night in 2005, and it did not go well. Tyson lost to Kevin McBride when he refused to answer the bell for the 7th round. Tyson admitted he wasn't in shape for the fight, he hadn't prepared, and only took it as a payday. He ended up losing 3 of his last 4 fights and said his heart just wasn't in it any longer. And time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? And this seems appropriate considering the Bulls Jazz story, but until 2017, there was a law in Utah called the Zion Curtain that required a bartender to make a drink out of view of the patron. Most bars put up frosted glass between the customer and the barkeep. When the law was repealed, the sound of shattering glass could be heard reverberating around the state. That's all for today. I'll have more tomorrow on This Dish. And as a reminder, This Day in Sports History is a member of the Sports History Podcast Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sports. Learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude. And I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website, seriously, all you got to do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.